For the trim of the hat, I'm using this yarn. I will put a link to it in the description. And I'm using this round loom. It has 36 pegs and is about 9.5 inches in diameter. So the first step is to just take the end of the yarn and tie a loose knot like this around that front pin, just to hold the end in place. Start on the peg on the left side of the front pin. So take the yarn behind each peg, wrap it around the front and around to the back. Repeat it on the peg to the left. Take it behind the peg, around the front, and around to the back. And repeat this process on each peg, going around the loom in a clockwise direction. And the more you do this, the easier it gets. You'll be able to do it really fast once you get used to it. And once you've made it all the way around the loom, we're going to go ahead and add a second level of this just above the first. So starting on that peg to the left of the front pin, wrap it from around the back and around the front, just repeating the exact same thing as before, just do it above the other row. Once you've made it around to the front, you can go ahead and secure that working yarn either by holding it in your hand like this or wrapping it around the front pin. Then take the hook tool that comes with the loom, and you're going to take that bottom loop and lift it right over the top and drop it off the peg on the back. Just like that. Take the bottom loop, lift it over the first and over the top of the peg. And again. And then push that stitch down once you've created it so it doesn't slide off the top. And repeat this process of lifting that bottom loop over the top one all the way around the loom until you've reached that front pin again. Now some people call this stitch different things, but for the purposes of this video we'll call it the knit stitch. So you've just completed your first row of the knit stitch. For the trim of this hat, we're going to do a row of knit and a row of purl. So now I'm going to show you how to do the purl stitch. So take the working yarn and pull it in front of the peg this time, and hold it so it's below the loop on the peg. Then take the hook tool and reach it behind the loop on the peg through that groove, and grab a hold of the working yarn that's below it and lift it back up through the loop on the peg. So it should create a loop just like this. Then lift the loop off the peg, and the loop you just created needs to go back over the peg, just like this. Here it is again. Hold the working yarn below the loop, reach the hook tool through it, grab a hold of the working yarn and lift it up through the loop, slide the loop off the peg, and put the loop you just created over the peg and pull it tight. And you're going to repeat this process going all the way around the loom until you reach the front pin. When I'm working on these, I kind of like to brace the loom against a surface while I'm working, so it helps if you put down a mat or something that isn't slippery for it to grip on while you're working. When you reach that front pin, you've just completed your first row of the purl stitch. So now we're going to alternate back to the knit stitch. So just like before, wrap it around the back and around the front of each pin, creating this row above the loops that are already on the pins. And go around the entire loom doing this. You may need to push down that other row of loops as you go so you have room above. Then once you've made it around the loom, just repeat the process we did before of lifting the bottom loop over the top one. And when you've made it around to the front pin again, we're going to do a row of the purl stitch. So just reach the tool through the top loop, create a loop with the working yarn, and put it over the peg. And once you finish this row of the purl stitch, you'll switch back to the knit stitch again. So just remember to alternate on each row. And if you need to take a break or something, you can just write down on a piece of paper what the last row you did was to make sure that you alternate on the next one. So this is what it should look like when you've continued alternating between the knit stitch and the purl stitch. And at this point, I think this is long enough to make into the trim for the hat. So this is about 5 inches long without stretching it at all. So I'm ready to make it into the trim. So to create the trim, we'll be folding it in half like this so there isn't a raw edge at the bottom. So we're going to start with that peg to the left of the front pin. And just follow its row all the way back to the edge. Make sure you don't get on another row. Make sure you stay on the right one. And when you follow that to the end, there should be a loop there, which was the first stitch that you created. So take the loop that's on the peg already and slide it down so there's room for another one above it. And just put that loop over the peg. Then repeat this on the second peg. Just follow the row back. Find the loop at the top and put it over the peg. And repeat this on the next peg. And it may be a little bit hard to figure out which part is the loop at first, but it gets easier as you go along. And if you kept your first row a bit loose, these will be easier to put on the pins, but if not, you'll just need to stretch them a little bit to get them on. And just go ahead and repeat this process on each peg going around the entire loom. And once you've reached that front pin, it should look like this. And now we're just going to knit these together just like a regular knit stitch. So just take the hook tool and lift the bottom loop over the top one and over the peg. And just repeat this all the way around the loom. Once you've completed the row, we're going to switch colors of yarn for the rest of the hat. So I'm just taking the working yarn here and I'm cutting it with about 2 feet of extra length left. And then just setting that aside. And then I'm taking this color of yarn, which is the same kind, and I will put it in the description as well. And taking the end of that, and I'm just tying a knot in it to create a loop, like this, and tying it again just for good measure. Then I'm taking that loop and I'm putting it on that left peg. Then I'm taking the working yarn and we're going to do a row of the knit stitch. So just wrap it around each peg and repeat this all the way around the loom as always. And when you've reached the front pin, we're just going to knit those together by lifting the bottom loop over the top one and the peg. Once you've made it all the way around, we're just going to be repeating this last step I'm about to show you for the rest of the hat. So we're going to knit 4 and purl 2. Knit 4 and purl 2 all the way around the loom. So the first 4 stitches are knit. And push those down. And then the next 2 are purl. And then the next 4 are knit. And the next 2 are purl. So you're just going to repeat knit 4 and purl 2 all the way around the loom. And these first couple rows, you'll need to be careful and really pay attention to what you're doing to make sure that you stay on the knit 4 and purl 2 pattern. And then once you've done a couple rows, I just wanted to show you that you'll be able to tell which peg is a knit and which is a purl. So these ones that look kind of braided, those are knit. And then the ones that look more flat, like right here, are purl. So if you ever get lost and you can't figure out if you're supposed to knit or purl on a certain peg, just follow it down and you'll be able to tell which one it is. So after following the process of knitting 4 and purling 2 for many rows, it will look like this. And you can actually try this on while it's still on the loom, and then you can gauge whether you need to add more rows or if it's ready to make into a hat. But I made mine about 9 inches long, which is about the size I would recommend for an adult. So now I'm taking this plastic needle that came with the loom. You could probably use a darning needle or even no needle at all if you don't have one. And I went ahead and cut the working yarn, so I just have a few feet extra left over. And I put the needle on the end of this. Then I'm just going to send it up through the loop on each peg, so it picks up the loop on the yarn, and then I'm just going to lift that off the peg. Like that. So just repeating this again, putting the needle up through the loop on the peg, pulling it through, and then lifting that off the peg. Then just repeat this all the way around the loom so all the loops are off the pegs. Then when you get to the last one, just do the same thing. So it should look like this. And then I'm just going to go ahead and pull on that yarn to gather it together. And keep track of the first loop that I'm pointing to right here, because you'll be tying a knot through that once we've done the gathering. So go ahead and pull it together. And I pulled this as tight as I could get it. And then I found that first loop, and if you can't find it, that's alright, just find a nearby loop. And I put the needle through it. And then I went through another loop and tied a knot. And you can finish this off however you'd like, but I just went through a couple loops and tied a knot a couple different times. Then I took some of that blue yarn that I used for the trim, and I just took the end and held it in my hand like this. The end is here, and then I took the working end and I just wrapped it around my fingers like this, keeping my fingers far apart, and this is to create the pom-pom for the hat. So just wrap it a whole bunch of times around your fingers, just deciding how dense you want the pom-pom to be. Then once you like how it is, going to take the working yarn and leave like 1.5 feet extra left and cut it. And then I'm taking that end and I'm taking it around behind and up through my fingers so it goes around the entire thing of yarn. And then see where it goes around to the back and pull it through there. And then just pull it really tight so it gathers it together. So I'm taking it off my fingers and tying it together with that other end so it secures it together like this. You can tie it again for good measure. So it should look like this. Then I'm taking some scissors and I'm putting the scissors through the loops and cutting them. Then repeat it on the other side. Then you can kind of fluff it up to make it look more like a pom-pom. And depending on the yarn you use, this will look different. Then I'm going to attach it to the hat. So you can attach this using any method you'd like, but what I came up with was putting the needle on one of the ends and putting it through the loops up here at the top of the hat, about halfway around the circle. Then I took the other end, put it on the needle, and I tied it with the first end that I just put through halfway. Then I'm taking this end and setting the needle through the other half of the circle. And then just finding where the first end started and putting the needle under that and tying a knot. And then I went through a couple different loops and continued to tie knots until I felt it was secure. And then I cut the extra yarn off on both ends. And then if you have any loose ends of yarn, you can put them inside the hat or weave them through the knitting. And that's it! I hope you've enjoyed this Loom Knit hat tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more from my channel, you can click one of these videos or subscribe, and I hope you have a great day.